Okay, we're up to Daf Chabez. It's a pretty relatively light daf. So we're up to the Mishnah on Daf Chabez Amar Aleph Avu B'nai. So let's just review. We know that you're supposed to have edus that sees the new moon. The new moon is usually dark. That's the molid, and then you see the sliver of the moon appear just before sunrise. You see, you really have to be up a whole night, and right before sunrise, you'll be able to see the new moon light up a little bit. So they needed witnesses to be able to testify that they saw the new moon. They would go to the Bezdin Yerushalayim, and the court would declare that today is Rosh Chodesh, because the first time the new moon can be seen, that is the day called Rosh Chodesh. So now, what are kosher edim? So we certainly cannot have a kosher edim, as you know. It can't be somebody who's under bar mitzvah, who's not, a shota, somebody who's deaf, blind. A Russia is not allowed to be and an interested party cannot be it cannot be a witnesses. It's regular witnesses that you would have in a civil case. So here we begin the Mishnah on Daf Chaf Bein. Hello, Luz. We just began.
Hi.
Hi. So Abu B'nai, we have a father and a son. Sharo es Chodesh. They saw the new moon. Okay. So now they're father and son. In a normal civil case, a father and son together are not kosher for edus. Okay, because they're called kroivim, related parties. So, but if they saw the new moon, nevertheless, yelchu, they should continue to go down to the courthouse, and even Mechal Shabbos to get to the courthouse. Why? Loi shemitztarfin zemzeh. Not because I want to tell you that you combine them with each other. They cannot say edus together. They cannot say edus on the new moon. Ella sheim yipasel echad mehem. If one, let's say, the father or the son is declared disqualified, let's say they didn't answer the questions correctly, you'd start of hasheni im achar. The other one could combine with another person that saw. If there's an individual that saw the new moon, he can combine with either the father or the son who was not disqualified, and is actually, his testimony is good. So they should continue to go. But one thing you see from the Tanakama is that a father and son are no good. By the way, a father and a grandson is also no good. They're related, but a great grandson, interestingly enough, is it can say testimony with his great grandfather. They're not as related. So, but Rab Shimon says, Abu B'nai v'chol ha'kroivim k'sheirim le'edus ha'chodesh. It's the exception. A father and a son and any relatives of two brothers are kosher to say edus ha'chodesh. That's what his opinion is. Omar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said, Masav, I'll tell you a story. B'tavia ha'roifeh sharas ha'chodesh b'Yerushalayim. Tavia, the doctor that saw the new moon in Yerushalayim. I guess he was up late at night, like 4 o'clock in the morning, and he saw it. It was three people, who Ubnoi, him and his son, Ba'abdoi Mishchuchrar, and his freed servant. They all saw the new moon. So now, on their way to the courthouse the next day, they passed through the Beis Hamikdash. The Kiblu HaKayanim Oisev Es B'noi, the Kahanim, which were not, they didn't have an official court, but they declared that Oisev Es B'noi, him and his son would be kosher for Eidish, for Chiddush HaChodesh, Uposloi as Avdoi, but they disqualified his servant, because his servant, because it's his Knani servant, he is not he's not a Jew from birth, right? Although he has to keep mitzvahs like a woman, but he's a ger. And according to Rabbi Shimon, which is the way the Kahanim held in the Beis Hamikdash, that a father and son is good, but a ger, or somebody not Jewish from birth, he's disqualified. Fine. When they continued on, they actually entered the court. Just the opposite. They accepted him and his servant, Tuvia the doctor and his servant, the ger, possibly is benai, and they disqualified the son because it's a relative. So each opinion you just learned had a kula and a chumrah. According to the Tanakama, there's a leniency, is that a ger or an eved is kosher, but a father and son are not kosher. Rab Shimon says the opposite. The father and son is kosher, but a eved is not kosher. So the Gemara says, Omer Rab Levi, my Talmud Rab Shimon. What is the reason of Rab Shimon? Why does he say a father and son is not kosher? It is kosher. It says in the pasuk, "Vayomer Hashem, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, vel Aharon be'eretz Mitzrayim lemor." Hashem said to Moshe and Aharon in the land of Mitzrayim, saying, "Hachodesh hazeh lechem." The new moon is for you to decide. People like you are kosher to be the testimony for the new moon. So we're holding Eidus Zeh Tia Kasher Bachem. We are holding by the yellow. Eidus Zeh Tia Kasher Bachem. The Eidus is kosher like Moshe and Aaron. They're brothers. So the Kiddush HaChodesh Eidus, according to Reb Shimon, is kosher with brothers. But it has to be somebody like Moshe and Aaron, Jewish from birth, not a slave. Rabbanan, how do they learn the pasuk? Eidezu tuhei mesur lechem. What the Chumash is saying, that the testimony should be given over to you. That means only a court, a bezdin, can decide if it's going to declare it Rosh Chodesh. If they're going to say today is a Rosh Chodesh, that's what the pasuk means. But it doesn't mean to give you a leniency that a father and son or relatives are kosher le'edus. It's not. It's the Torah saying only the edus is given over to people, to the leaders of the generation, like Moshe and Aaron. But you still need no relatives, but a ger, an eved, is also kosher. Zog the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosi Ma'aseh b'Tovia Harayfe, Amar Rav Chanan bar Rava Hilkasa Rab Shimon. The halacha remains like Rab Shimon, that a father and son are kosher for edus achodesh. Amar le Rav Huna Rav Chanan bar Rava. Rav Huna said to Rav Chanan bar Rava, Rabbi Yosi Umaisa. Rabbi Yosi seems to hold in our Mishnah, like the Tanna Kama, that they're not kosher. And actually, there's a story that said the Kahanim went like Rab Shimon, but the real court did not go like Rab Shimon. How do you say, Rab Chanan, that the halacha is like Rab Shimon when the Mishnah seems to bend towards the halacha is not like Rab Shimon? So Rab Chanan said, I don't know. Amalai. So Rab Chanan said to Rab Huna, "Vazimnim sagin amrius kamed Rav Hilkas Rab Shimon." Many times they said in front of Rab that the halacha is like Rab Shimon. He didn't say anything. So Rab Huna was precocious, and he asked him, "Amalei heika tanis, how did you read the Mishnah?" Amalei, I read the Mishnah to Rav Ipcha, just the opposite of what we have here. The Rab Shimon disqualified relatives, and the Rabbanim were machshir, made it kosher to have relatives as Eidim. Oh, so that explains everything. Amalei, so Rav Huna told Rav Chanan, Mishum hachi le'amalach v'lei midi. That's the reason why I didn't tell you anything, because the halacha is that Eidim that are related are disqualified for Kiddush HaChodesh, and that's why he didn't tell you the halacha is not like Rab Shimon as we read in the Mishnah, but the only reason why Rav agreed that the halacha is like Rab Shimon because you read the Mishnah with the opinions reversed. Amar Tavi Berei de Mari Tavi, the son of Mari Tavi. Amar Ma'uk v'Sennemat. The halacha is like Rab Shimon, probably means the halacha is like what we read in the Tanna Kama, which is that an Ab Ubenoi are not kosher le'edus hachodesh. Next Mishnah. Now, we know, as explained before, that one of the disqualifications for a witness to see the new moon is a rasha. Now, it's easy to describe a rasha in a Torah. That's very easy. Guy who killed somebody, a guy who's an outright thief. Those are rashoim in the Torah. But there are certain rashoim that are drabanan, and they're also not disqualified. Disqualified to say edus hachodesh. Eila hein hapsulim. The following apostle, because they're considered rashoim, evil people midrabanan. Who is considered an evil person midrabanan? Hamasachek bekubiya, somebody who's a gambler. He plays with dice. And so what does that mean? So there are two reasons why. If that's his only profession, then he's somebody who is not involved in the building of the world. God wants a person to be constructive in his life, and if a person is a full-time gambler, he's not constructive, and therefore he's disqualified. He's considered a rasha midrabanan. He's wasting his life away. Rashi also says there's another reason brought in the Gemara, is that when a gambler wins the bet, the other side, although agreed initially to if he loses the bet, will forego the money, but he doesn't really mean it, and therefore you're like a gazlan midrabanan. You're a gazlan midrabanan, and therefore therefore it's disqualified. What Rashi also is trying to say is that even if you're a part-time gambler, not a full-time gambler, so the first reason doesn't apply, because the first reason I said was because you're not involved in doing constructive. So if he's a part-time gambler, he has another job somewhere else, that would not disqualify him. But according to Rashi here, the disqualification is because he's taking money that really doesn't belong to him. So it's called a smachta loikanya, and therefore he's disqualified midrabanan to be an edis. Umalve beribis, and somebody who lends on interest. Now, interest is minat Torah, right? You're not allowed to lend somebody and he pays you back interest. But the interest that's written in the Torah is only if at the time of the loan, you made a document that said that he's going to pay you interest. But if at the time of the loan, you did not stipulate interest, but afterwards you stipulated interest, that's only also drabanan. And that also type of lender on interest is disqualified midrabanan. Mafriche yainim. Mafriche yainim, according to Rashi here, is similar to somebody who gambles. Just he's a pigeon racer, so they race pigeons. But others say he trains his doves, his birds, to go to other people's property, to take birds, to entice birds to follow it to its owner's property. So he's like stealing birds that not necessarily belong to somebody else, but are in somebody else's property. So therefore, that's also disqualified midrabanan. V'soichere shavias, and somebody who does business on Shemitah. In other words, somebody goes into the field, and all the fruits are supposed to be for free, and he collects it all and sells it in his grocery store. So that is also midaraisa, but only when Shemitah is daraisa. B'zman hazeh Shemitah is drabanan. So the chiddush of the Mishnah is, the novelty is that even though he's doing only Isser drabanan, he's considered a rasha and he's pasul le'edus hachodesh. Ba'avodim and slaves, as we said before, this is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. The Stam Mishnah is like Rabbi Shimon here, that says a goyish slave, even though it's psul daraisa, but you might think that since relatives are kosher, so a slave would be also kosher for an edis. No, the apostle for edis hachodesh. Zah kalal. This is the rule. Kol edis she'ein isha kasher la, afhein eina kasher la. Any testimony that a woman is not kosher, in other words, that a woman is not allowed to say edis, they're not allowed to say edis. In other words, a regular civil case that has to do with monetary issues, a woman is not a good edis, and neither are the aforementioned in the Mishnah. But there's one case where we would believe a woman, and that is when it comes to the death of a man, and we want to allow his wife to be able to get married and not to remain an aguna. So even a woman, an eid yachid, they were lenient and said a woman could say testimony that a man died, and that man's wife is permitted to get married. Because in order that we shouldn't have agunas all around, even a woman would be believed in that scenario. So we're saying that not only if a woman is believed, then all these psulim that we said are possible edus hachodesh, they would be kosher in the case of the death of a man. So masachet b'kubiyah, ma'av b'ribis, mafrich yonim are all kosher to say edus that a person died and his wife is permitted to get married. But my point is, but if it was a rasha d'oraisa, a complete rasha, an outright thief, then he's not even kosher for that. That you have to know. This is only because he's only pasam d'Rabbanan, they gave that leniency. So that's what he's saying. Ha isha ksherla, afen ksherla. If an isha was kosher to say testimony, like I explained before, afen ksherla, they would also be kosher in that case to say the edus that a man died. Amar Avashi, Zaysumeres, from here we can prove, Gazlan de Devrayim ksherla edus isha. A Gazlan that's only called a Gazlan midrabanan, Kisherin, they're kosher to say testimony for a woman that she can get married because her husband died. Next. Mishara as a chodesh. Now we know that you're allowed to be the edus that comes to say kiddush chodesh, to say testimony for the new moon. That edus, that person could be mechal Shabbos. It's not like it's like pekuch nefesh, so to speak. You're allowed to be mechal Shabbos. So the Mishnah says, Mishara as a chodesh. A person saw the new moon on Friday night, right? On Friday night towards sunrise. He can't walk because it's too far from Jerusalem. You can lead him on a donkey. In other words, even though there's a drabanan riding or have something leading somebody on a donkey, that's permitted because you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos. Not only that, afila b'mita, even if he's sick somewhat, and you're carrying him in a bed, which we know that carrying a sick person in a bed, so to speak, is also drabanan, because chai noises atzmai, and the bed becomes subservient to the body. So it's not really a deraisa thing. You're allowed to do that. And now the Mishnah says not only drabanans, if you're scared of vandals, so like can be other maklis, you're allowed to take for yourself sticks and weapons to protect yourself as you make your way on Shabbos to the Bezdin. If it's a faraway place, like can be yadam mezainis, you're allowed to take food. Sha'al, the Mishnah says, Sha'al mahalach laila b'yoyim machalan as Shabbos yoytznei desachaydish. Because as long as there's a night and day, you live in a distance between that it takes you to get there, either a night and a day, like less than 24 hours to get to Bezdin, you're allowed to desecrate the Shabbos to get there and say testimony to Bezdin. Shenema, how do you know you're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos? Elu ma'adei Hashem asher tikru oisam b'mayadam. This is the Yom Tiv of Hashem, which includes Rosh Chodesh, asher tikru oisam, that you have to declare it b'mayadam in its time. So if it's the time, no matter what, you have to go there and say edus that the edus that you saw the new moon, and you could be Mechal Shabbos on that. The Torah gives you the free license. And I want to point out,
is that for every Chodesh or just for Nisan and V'Tishrei?
Every Chodesh. Now, we were learning before that there's another part to Bezdin. Not only once Bezdin declares Chodesh, then they send out messengers to notify the diaspora and all around to Bavel that we were Mekadesh Chodesh. But those messengers are not Mechal Shabbos. Those messengers are not allowed because only the declaring of the Yom Tiv is the declaring of Rosh Chodesh is Mechal Shabbos, but not beyond that, not the Shluchim. That's why the Shluchim were not Mechal Shabbos. But here's a point that I want to bring out, that it's not only the guy who saw the Eidus, but anybody who helps the person to become an aid is also allowed to be Mechal Shabbos, because the Torah says, make sure that it's called, do whatever you can to declare the Rosh Chodesh in its time. So that leads us, that leads us to the next Mishnah. Bezdin had a rule, a court in Yerushalayim, they would not accept Eidus unless they had, the aid was on a, like they have the vaccine list, so that you are dedicated, they know who you are. So let's say a guy knows that when he gets to Bezdin is not going to believe him. They're not going to believe he's Jewish or anything like that. So then, he's allowed to have another person call with him to say testimony that this guy who saw the Eidus is a legitimate person. You see, so not only he's allowed to go be Mechal Shabbos, but his assistant. Now,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Shluchim are not allowed to Mechal Shabbos for any Chodesh. Again, Nisan for Tishrei.
No,
not even Nisan for Tishrei.
No, they're not allowed for Nisan for Tishrei. Nothing. So that's why in Nisan they had less time to get there because they Rosh Hashana they couldn't travel.
Right.
So you're right. So they were not. That's why Shisha, because on those months, first of all, they didn't send messengers every month, but you'll see. We'll see how they had a way to get the message out every month, but you'll see. If the Bezdin doesn't know this pair of Eidim, then you're allowed to send another pair of Eidim to say testimony. Okay, I'm telling you what the Maskonas Gemara is. So listen to this. In the beginning, Bezdin, anybody who walked in to the Bezdin and said, I saw the new moon, they accepted it. The Minim were the Christians, or the Baisonim, or the Tzedukim, which lived 50 years before the Christians, and they had an interest to mess up the Chodesh, because they had an interest to make sure that Pesach comes out on Shabbos and that Shavuos would come out on a Sunday. That's what their interest was. So they did whatever they can to blow the whole thing, the calculations. They would send false witnesses to Bezdin to say they saw the new moon so that they can get their way, because they interpreted the Torah literally. And literally, if you read the Torah literally, the Torah says that Shavuot should be like on a Sunday. Mimochras Shabbos, you take 50 days. So but that's not the literal meaning. That we know al pi Kabbalas Chazal that the Torah wants you to count not from Sunday, but from the day after the first day of Pesach. No matter what day the first day of Pesach comes out, you can start counting on a Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. It doesn't matter. So the minim were trying to mess up the bezdin. Hiskinu, therefore, they made a rule. You have to be on the good list, so to speak, of accepted edim, and then they would accept you. And if they didn't know who you are, you had an obligation to have somebody come with you. Gemara says, "My acher." What is this meaning of the word acher? Let me just get it. What do you mean? The Gemara understood. If you read the Mishnah literally, we're on the Chafez Amacheni. The Mishnah seems to say that one pair of edim, one person would be believed to say edus about somebody. So Vatanya, that's not true. A guy, an aid came, a person who saw the Chodesh, and he had his two aidim testify that he's a legitimate person. You can't have one person testify that you're legit. You need two people to testify you're legit. So what does our Mishnah say? That somebody, one person could walk with him. A Mishnah, that's what the Mishnah means. My acher, what does the Mishnah mean? Another person? Doesn't mean another person. Zug acher. Mishnah means another two people, another pair of aidim go along with the first Adam to say testimony that they're legit. This makes perfect sense. If you don't say, if you don't recognize him. So the way you read the Mishnah, it seems that one person would be believed for Kiddush HaChodesh. If my oisai, ilema oisai chad, that means only one person came to say testimony on the Kiddush HaChodesh, and the Mishnah is talking about if we would accept him, we just need to know who he is. So, but v'chad mi mehemam, is one person believed for Kiddush HaChodesh? Mishpach sibei. The Torah, in Tanakh, it describes Kiddush HaChodesh as like a regular judgment case, which needs two people. Elamai oisei. So the Mishnah, when it says oisei, means oisei zug. And Mishnah means if we don't recognize this pair of Adam, you send another pair of Adam to say testimony that this pair of Adam is legit. Hachanami, my acher zugachi, you send another pair of Adam to be Michal Shabbos to verify the legitimacy of the first Adam. So the Gemara asks, okay, so you just got through saying that one aid is not kosher for Kiddush HaChodesh, to say the testimony for the new moon. For the Gemara, v'chad lo and is one not believed. Well, Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Ma'aseh b'Rab Naharai sheholach eitzel ha'aid lahoyed alav b'Shabbos b'usha. When Naharai came alone, Rabbi Naharai came alone to say testimony on Shabbos in Usha to the best in Yerushalayim, wherever it was in his time. But maybe it was in Yavna. But the story is that we see that they were makabel even one person. Amri, so the Gemara answered, no. Rabbi Nari Sadachrina Hababade. Rabbi Nari went with another person. Why didn't we mention him? Because of the honor of Rabbi Narai. Because the whole point of the story is to show that even a great person, Rabbi Narai, probably never was Mechal Shabbos in his entire life. He was Mechal Shabbos to go to the Bezdin. That's why we mentioned him. But obviously there was other person. Ravashi Amar Narnoi Sadachrina Hababusha. He had another test. In fact, he walked alone. But he knew that somebody in Usha, where the Bezdin was in Usha, that was there waiting for him to join him so they can testify together. V'aza Rab Narai, that's Rufa B'dei. Rab Narai came to join him. I remember, what is the novelty of this statement, of this story? I would the same matter thought. I would thought that if you have a doubt, because it's still in doubt, Rab Narai, when he probably got to Usha, maybe the guy who was supposed to join him got COVID or whatever, or he's not at home, and he won't join him. So Rab Narai left his house and was Mechal Shabbos on a possibility that he could be an aid for Kiddush HaChodesh. And I would think you're not supposed to do that. Kamash Malon, that's the novelty of the story, that even if you're not sure, you're still supposed to be Mechal Shabbos. Zog the Gemara, ki asa ulab. Now, here, this is what I was telling you, Sheldon. When you're just the shliach notifying the people, you're not Mechal Shabbos. Mm-hmm. So ki asa ula, when Ula arrived in Bavel, he was the shliach, let's say, and he said, and here you don't even need Adam. One shliach is believed. He said, Kiddush, you should know, they in Eretz Yisrael, they were Makadosh the Chodesh. Amar Rav Kahana, so Rav Kahana says, Loi Memboya, you don't, Ula, the Galva Rabbah, who, you don't have to tell me, Ula, for sure you can trust, because he's a great person, the Mehemanis believe. Even if a guy who's not even Shliach Bezdin, who's just a guy that walked into your shul in Bavel and told you that they were Makadosh the Chodesh, he's believed also. Because my time, what's the reason? It's something that could be verified, and so generally a person's not going to lie. So if somebody could be caught with a lie, he's not going to lie. So therefore, this is something that everybody eventually is going to know when Bezdin was Makadosh HaChodesh. So the first person to tell you is automatically believed. And you don't even need a pair of Adim. You just need one person to tell you. Tanya Nami, we learned the same thing in a Brisa. Somebody came from the other side of the planet and told you Bezdin was Makadosh HaChodesh. You don't even know who he is. Nami, you should believe him. The beginning, they were Makabal Eidish Chodesh from everybody. Tana Rabbanim, my Kilkulu Aminim. What was the story with the Christians that they messed things over? So what were they doing? Pam Achas Bikshu by Soisim. These are the precursors. 250 years before the destruction of the temple, there was a group of Bison and Sedoikim. Again, people who only believed in the written law. So they wanted Lahates Chachamim to fool the Chachamim into thinking that there was Kiddush HaChodesh. Sachru Shnei B'nei Adam. They hired two people, but Dalet Mei Zuz for 400 Zuz. Echad Mishalanu ve'echad Mishalahem. So they hired two people. One was a frum Jew, and one was a Bison Jew. He was a hectic heresy Jew. And so one of them, that's what they had. Shalahem, the guy from them, hey, they do Seviyata. He said his testimony, he saw the new moon, and they accepted it. Shalonu, but us, the guy that was from us, Amalai, they asked him, Ketza Re'isa Salavana, how did you see the moon? Amalahem, he wanted to give away that he's been hired to say false edus. So he said in like a riddle, Oila Hayiseb, with first white line, Oila Hayiseb Bamala Adumim. The moon walk, I saw it in the Malay Adumim, which was, I saw it in the place called Malay Adumim. Reisiv, I saw the moon root, Shuravet Spain based line. It was crouching between two rocks. Rosh Daimel Egel, it had a head like a calf. Oznav Daimel Legdi, its ears were like a goat. Karna of Daimel, let's see, it had horns, this new moon, like a deer. And his tail was, the tail of the moon was between its legs, which absolutely makes no sense. But basically, he was trying to tell these the judges that he's nuts. The tzati boy, and then I looked at the move, and he tati, and I got scared, and I fell backward. Then aim atam immediately, but then he tells the judges, if you don't believe me, I have 200 zuz in my back pocket. Basically, he was telling I was hired to say false edus. So they caught up on it, and they understood what he was trying to say. Who forced you into this? And why did you do this? Why did you come here to try to say edus? So he said a very nice thing. He said to them, I was friends, and I heard that the Baitaisim wanted to fool the Chachamim. Amarti, I'm going to say, I should be join them and pretend that I'm going to do their work for them, so they'll hire me. Because if they hire somebody else, they'll be successful. And they'll fool the Chachamim. So the Chachamim realized what a heroic act he did. The Chacham told him, the Masayim, the 200 zuz, you don't have to return, because even though you didn't keep your end of the deal saying false witness, but Hefker Bezdin Hefker, we're giving it to you as a gift, it's ours, and we're giving it to you. The one that hired you, will be flogged on the stand. On that moment, when they saw potentially that the Baitusim are trying to hire people to mess up Bezdin, that they don't accept edus only if you recognize the person. If you don't recognize the person, we don't accept him. Next Mishnah, and then we'll stop. Burishayna. Now, how did they notify the group? After Bezdin said Mikudish, now you notice that the Mishnah prior, you see the Mishnah in Rosh Hashana is a little bit out of order, because the Mishnah Rosh Hashana says they used to send shluchim, but that was not the original case. The original case was Barishayna, in the beginning, they would light torches on mountains in Eretz Yisrael, and so somebody, when Bezdin was Mekadosh Chodesh, let's say they Mekadosh Chodesh on the 30th day of the month, right? That night they lit torches, and people knew that the past 30th day was Rosh Chodesh, and therefore they would light torches, and from one mountain to another mountain to another mountain. Once one torch was lit, the guy on the next mountain would see a torch lit, and he would light up a torch. And that's the way they communicated throughout Israel. From one mountain to another mountain, they lit up torches. Mishakilkalu hakuthim, when the kuthim made it destructive, they started lighting torches on days that were not Rosh Chodesh, to fool people to thinking that today was Rosh Chodesh. And therefore, Hiskinu, that's when they made the rule, shluchin yotzin, that we're not doing the torch thing, but we're going to send messengers. Now, important to point out, this mess up of the Kutim happened after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, not like what we said before with the Baisusim. These are Kutim Samaritans that were lived in Samaria, in north of Israel. They were like Goyim or semi-Jews. They were just stam doing it, no particular reason. So therefore, they made a rule. They made a new law that the shluchin should be yotzim, that they send messengers to notify the people. Now I'm pointing out to you. So we had a previous Mishnah that talked about the messengers. That came later on in history, and yet the Mishnah put it before because it had a number to it. And we learned Abar Rosh Hashanah, Abar times this, 4, 4. So you'll remember the Mishnah. So the next Mishnah starts Shisha. Six times the shluchim would go out. That made it easier to memorize the Mishnayos. But now,
Bernard, if it was a mole, if it was a 30-day chodesh, did they just not light the torches?
yes,
Or did they light
correct.
or did they light so they didn't light the torches on the 31st?
That's right. Only on the
Okay.
30th at night.
Okay.
Very good. Not the 31st. In the Mishnah, the
Okay.
Gemara is going to talk about that.
Okay.
So they made the new rule that the shluchim sheyachin. So the Mishnah says that, Meheri Yabana Beis Hamikdash, you see how the Mishnah did never believe that we'll have cell phones. So that's why the Mishnah tells you how it was done. You see, the hope is that we'll never have to do with the shluchim again. We'll go back to lighting the torches. So the Mishnah describes, how did they light the torches? They would bring long poles of cedar, the konim and reed, the atze shemen and pine wood, piston, and beaten flax. All these things are flammable to create a nice torch that will last, so that it doesn't burn the guy holding it. The kairech b'mashicha, and they tie all these ingredients, these materials in with a string. And then person went up to the top of the mountain, and would light a fire. So he waved it side to side and up and down, so it doesn't look like a shooting star. It's very important. You have to wave it like a cross because it could be misinterpreted like a shooting star. So that's why it went in different directions. Until he kept his torch lit until he saw his friend on the second mountain doing the same thing. So he knew his friend got the message on the mountain number 2, and therefore then he could put out his torch until the third mountain. Now the Gemara says, Mishnah says, which mountain started the lighting torch? So Mahar Mishcha. Har Mishcha is Har Zaysim, right outside the old city, right behind the wall there. That was the first mountain. Sartava, the mountain number 2 is Sartava. Masarta Garfina the Chavarian the Beis Pilton. Beis Pilton was the last northern mountain of Israel. And the guy on that top of that mountain didn't stop waving his torch. He'd go back and forth until all the people who were in the diaspora, which means in Pumpadisa, which is in Bavel, the most southern part of Bavel, so to speak, everybody who saw that would come onto their own roofs and start lighting torches. And so, Pumpadisa was like New York, was the main city in Bavel. So everybody started lighting torches. So the guy on top of the Israel mountain got the message that the people in Bavel are notified. And then from Bavel, they had a better communication, and they told everybody in Bavel.
What about the south of Israel?
Oh, I was wondering about that. I thought maybe the south wasn't so inhabited because it's more desert-like.
Okay.
Ben Gurion said we should get the Negev inhabited.
Bernard, what if it was inclement weather? What if it was very windy or rainy, and you couldn't light it up?
That's a good question. I didn't see that answer. I don't know.
I thought we
Uh,
said that they would wait an extra day. I don't know what happens if there's 2 days. I don't know.
No, the big question, we're going to deal with that tomorrow. But the big question is, let's say the 30th day was on a Friday. So Friday was Rosh Chodesh. So as I told you, at night after Rosh Chodesh, they wave the torches.
Mhm.
How could you wave it on Friday night?
Right.
So we'll deal with these questions tomorrow. But the question about the rain, I don't think we'll ever deal with. That's a good question. I'll look it up.
Mhm.
Right. They would only do this if it was a chaser, the month.
Yes, only do it when there's a chaser because of Rosh Hashana. We'll see about that.
Right.
Why they only did it on chaser.
They would only see in a chaser. You had to see it that night. The chance out was at least there was fewer clouds.
No, when you had
Oh.
29 days in the previous month, the 30th day is Rosh Chodesh.
Right, so
That's when they declare Rosh Chodesh. That night, they told
night.
everybody that based in that the day before was Makadosh the Chodesh.
Yeah, so it still could be a different weather pattern. Yeah, it's a good kasha.
It's a very good question. Maybe he's still with an umbrella. I have no idea. Right, or a tent. I don't know. It's a good question. It's a very good question. I have to look at that.
a lot of light that would not be extinguished, but that's good
Right.
kasha.
No, that
Okay. All right. Very good, everybody. Good Nacht. We'll see each other
Good enough.
tomorrow.
Good
Be'ez
enough.
Hashem.
Good enough. Thank you.
Bye.